yellow.
I am up on, let's see, it looks like 15 now. So I'll just say something.
Towards his direction.
Staging. If you want me to come up here, I can do it.
Oh, well, I'll try if I can.
Okay. So these are the only ones that are ours. I think I'm gonna.
Do you have an extra packet?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna. He's gonna speak first.
That's fine. I have 2 mics.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
good.
Okay, thank you. Only one of them had the flag thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You all right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you used to dance a lot in Michigan? Is this why you're so?
I didn't do a lot. No, but I've done it before. Yeah, so I have had different opportunities to engage with you. It's fun.
I think the last time, no, second to last time that I ran a news conference was after the state superintendent.
Mic check for everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Speaking at audio level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Everyone good? Juanito has an issue. Anyone else? 1, 2, 3. Randy, Donnie, you guys all good? Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Of course, my phone starts ringing. 4, 5. You good one? All right.
I think you want her to introduce us or do you want us to introduce ourselves? It's weird. Yep. Yep, true.
Do you need some water?
Nope. Well, I might. You'll find out eventually. Laney, can we make sure that Jonathan's ready with the live too?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to Scottsdale Unified School District this afternoon. My name is Scott Menzel, and I'm the superintendent here. I'm pleased to be joined by Chief Jeff Walther from Scottsdale City Police, and we're happy to talk this afternoon about the incidents that took place earlier this week at the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting and provide some information with respect to some of the things that have been circulating in our community that people have questions about, and then talk about our next steps. So on Tuesday, May 18th, the Scottsdale Unified School District Board of Education convened for its final meeting while school is still in session. One of the time-honored traditions of this meeting is to celebrate numerous student successes along with recognizing employees, many of whom have been with us 35 and one of them 40 years. It's not uncommon for there to be a large crowd at this final meeting of the school year for the celebration, and many parents and staff join the celebration of our student successes. In the packet, we've actually included information for you to see all of the students that were going to be recognized along with the employees. The packet you have also has information, a letter of support from the Mayor of Scottsdale and the Mayor of Phoenix, along with a statement of support by the Arizona School Board Association. The meeting this week, though, was a little different than what we've had traditionally. In the days leading up to the meeting, we began to receive some information that indicated that there might be more people in attendance, that there were some issues and concerns that were being raised, and they placed a call to action that encouraged individuals to attend in order to confront the governing board. And this is a quote: "Stop the indoctrination of our children, end mask mandates, respect the rights of students and parents, leave the healthcare decisions of students between the parents and their physicians, and full educational transparency." They were not coming to celebrate our students' successes. They were not coming to speak to specific agenda items, as was purported in some of the information that was circulating. In fact, none of the topics that they alleged were going to be discussed, critical race theory, mask, or vaccinations, were even on the agenda for Tuesday evening. If you watched the meeting video, you know that numerous requests were made by our governing board president for the individuals who were in the room to put on their mask. Scottsdale Unified has had a mask requirement since the beginning of the school year, and we've indicated to our community that that mask requirement is remaining in place until the end of the school year, which is next Thursday. These requests were met with disrespect, derision, and shouting. The governing board was ready and willing to conduct the meeting, but the chaos that ensued, which we have since learned was incited by at least some non-SUSD community members, was premeditated, and it made it impossible for the Board of Education and the board president to establish decorum. It was at that point that the governing board voted to recess the meeting. Even then, the governing board was still prepared to have conversations. They didn't run away from our parents or constituents. In fact, they remained in the room having civil conversation with people who approached the dais, and in fact, in one case, moved to another location to have a meeting with the group of parents about the Chaparral Light situation. It wasn't until the chief of security really encouraged the governing board members to leave that they vacated the premise. This afternoon, we want to address, as I mentioned, some of the misinformation that's been circulating, and both before the meeting on Tuesday and after, and really address the next steps, and at the end, issue a call for civil discourse in our public conversations as we look to engage in conversations and topics that can often be difficult. So to address some of the issues of concern, first, the mask requirements. It's not a surprise to anyone here that masks have been contentious since they've been required. There have been different conversations about if they're effective or not effective. But in our schools, we had a mask policy that was required by the governor's executive order up until about a month ago when that requirement was removed. However, the Center for Disease Control and the Maricopa County Department of Public Health still recommend that people who are not vaccinated wear masks. Our students, for the most part, are ineligible or have not yet been fully vaccinated. So the district made the decision that through the end of this school year, we would maintain the mask mandate while our students are inside. We also made modifications about a month ago that allowed for a mask option when students were outside for recess or outside for PE. So it's not as though Scottsdale Unified drew a hard line in the sand and said, we're just going to require masks no matter what. We've been making incremental steps towards relaxing the mask requirement and following the guidance of public health officials. that had been communicated clearly with our families. Additionally, Friday, May 14th, we sent communication that indicated to our families that we expect and are planning for an optional use of masks when we start the school year next year. So some have questioned and they wondered, what will Scottsdale Unified be doing? We sent the signal very clearly that our plan is to begin with masks being optional when we return to school in the fall. This is based on a number of factors, including the fact that students 12 and older are already eligible for being vaccinated. We know that there's work on younger age vaccinations. Many of our staff, most of them, have had the opportunity and or been vaccinated. And we've seen in the data that the transmission rate and serious illness is much lower in our younger students. So we announced that plan to our public before the governing board meeting. We also noted that we'll continue to consult with public health officials because none of us can, with confidence, predict what to expect when we return to school in August. The next question that came up was with respect to vaccinations, and there were some rumors that were circulating that the district is mandating our children to be vaccinated. The governing board and the district has not, nor does it intend to mandate COVID-19 vaccines. Never been a part of our conversation. We have encouraged both our staff and students who are eligible to get vaccinated because we have a vested interest in being able to drive down the COVID cases in our community in order to ensure the health and safety of our staff and students when they come to school. We provide information to our families so that they can know where to access the vaccine. But we respect and understand that it's the parents' right to make decisions for themselves and their family. And so our encouragement does not translate into a mandate. So we wanted to clarify that this afternoon. Thirdly, we've heard from many people that Scottsdale Unified School District is supposedly and has supposedly adopted critical race theory. And I want to say very clearly that the governing board has not considered nor has it adopted critical race theory as a part of the district's curriculum. While there are those who continue to make false allegations to the contrary, what Scottsdale Unified School District does support is culturally relevant and responsive teaching practices. This pedagogy is grounded in teachers displaying cultural competence and having the skills to teach in cross-cultural and multicultural settings. Some have also asked whether or not we're teaching the 1619 project as part of the curriculum. And again, the answer is that the governing board has not adopted Project 1619 curriculum, and they've not even had that conversation. However, I want to say that it's important to note that as a district, we teach U.S. history. And that includes the history of slavery, a very ugly chapter in our nation's history. There's some confusion about teaching past aspects of our history that can be interpreted in different ways. And I want to say that the aspirational ideals upon which this country was founded, including those found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, represent a vision that we should all be striving for. Throughout history, there have been times where we have fallen far short of those ideals as a nation. There are other times when we've risen to the challenges associated with ensuring liberty and justice for all. Scottsdale Unified School District is committed to the dignity and worth of each individual. We are constantly working to ensure that our schools are safe and that we provide welcoming learning environments for our diverse student population. In today's highly politically charged environment, it's important to create the space to engage in thoughtful and reflective dialogue regarding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We owe that to our students, the next generation of leaders. It is my hope that we will be able to engage more of our community in constructive conversations on these important topics on our path toward ensuring that each student is supported in achieving their full potential. Next, in terms of where do we go from here, I'm honored to be joined today by Scottsdale Police Chief Jeff Walther. SUSD has a long-standing and positive working relationship with the Scottsdale Police Department, and we're grateful for their partnership in providing school resource officers to our middle schools and high schools and partnering and supporting the districts in so many other ways. Several of the SROs were present Tuesday evening as a result of the information the department received before the meeting and since. That information, which Chief Walther can elaborate on, and a summary of which is included in your packet, has led us to the decision that the May 18th governing board meeting, which was recessed at that meeting, will resume virtually on Monday, May 24th at 6 p.m. as permitted under the open meeting law. It will be done so in order to ensure that its agenda is completed in the business-like atmosphere in which it should be. I want to be clear this afternoon that the district and the governing board want to hear from our parents and our community. Diversity of thought and perspective in a public format that allows questions and concerns to be raised has been a long-standing practice of the governing board at the regular monthly meetings, even though public comment is not required under Arizona statute. Given the increased threats of disruption that Chief Walther outlined earlier this week in a memo to the district, we believe that holding an in-person meeting is not advisable at this time. The district will invite those who conclusion, this past year has not been an easy year. Scottsdale Unified, along with every other school district in the Valley, across the state and nation, has had to navigate the unknowns and uncertainty related to COVID-19. In March of 2020, when schools in Arizona were sent virtual, none of us could have predicted that we would still be dealing with the pandemic today. As a district, we have worked diligently to provide educational opportunities for our students, both in person and online, in order to ensure that each student was provided an educational option that met their and their families' needs. At the same time, we are charged with ensuring a healthy and safe learning and teaching environment for our students and staff. This meant following guidance from public health officials related to mitigation strategies to slow the spread of the virus. We were fortunate to have a partnership with Honor Health where we were able to get our teachers vaccinated early on. We've been doing everything as a district that we can to ensure that we're able to provide meaningful and high-quality learning opportunities for our students in person. Through all of this, our students and staff have persevered. The disruptions at the May 18th school board meeting undermined the myriad of ways our community, the Scottsdale Unified community, has come together through these challenges. We have been and will continue to be a community with diversity of thought and perspective. It is one of the great things about living in this country and in this community. As we prepare for the final week of school, including final exams, student graduations and promotions, I hope that we're able to return our focus to the students and ensuring that each one of them gets the support they need to finish the year strong. We want to celebrate the class of 2021 and their opportunity to have in-person graduations this year. And we hope that as we head into the summer break, we can begin with a renewed sense of optimism as we see COVID case numbers continuing to decline, as we see additional positive signs in our community. And we want to invite our community to continue in a dialogue about important issues affecting public education in Scottsdale. With that, I would like to open it up for questions for the police chief and/or for me. And before we take your questions, if you can state your name and which affiliate, that will help us know who you are, and then direct the question.
Chief, this is for you. My name is Spencer Blake. I'm on Channel 3, Channel 5 here for the family.
Yes, sir.
We thought it was interesting that you were here for this meeting with the district as well, and I read the document that you have alongside within your invite and everything. I'm curious that on Tuesday, was there anybody who either had to be escorted from the premises or arrested or cited or anything like that? Was there any criminal anything with what happened on Tuesday?
No, we had nobody that we arrested that night, and so nobody that was escorted from the building or nobody that was arrested. We did have some disruption that we were able to quell and to deal with at that time, but nobody was arrested. As for the beginning part of your question, really was why am I here? That is really a 30-year plus collaborative relationship that we have with Scottsdale Unified School District. Dr. Menzel and I have a lot of regular conversation with one another about the public safety element and the safety element within the school system in Scottsdale. And so this was just a natural course of action for us to meet together and answer any questions that you might have related to the media packet.
I have a few questions, so I apologize. Just to clarify.
Name and affiliate.
I'll go with Fox 10.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, to go back, a public meeting is not advisable at this time. I kind of want to break down that quote. So are you worried about these disruptions escalating? And is that where the police come in here? Are there any, I have more questions about the outside groups later, but are there any threats going on? Is that something you can tell us?
Is that for me or Dr. Menzel?
That's for you.
Yeah, so obviously, as you well understand, I maintain an intelligence unit within the Scottsdale Police Department, and we look at open source media and social media related to Tuesday night's activities. And so there has been a lot of chatter about the meeting and a call to disruption. And I'll call it a call to disruption because that's what it is. There are a number of groups, some not affiliated at all with the Scottsdale Unified School District, who have put out their call to arms, so to speak, of, hey, let's get as many people to the meeting as we can, let's disrupt the meeting. Some comments about let's make it a Vail-style meeting where we take over the meeting. And so, yeah, there is a lot of chatter out there about disrupting the meeting and disrupting the orderly conduct of the meeting with board members. So that's what Dr. Menzel and I have had the conversations about related to our ability to make sure that the board members are safe, that the parents who come in are safe, that the Scottsdale Unified School District staff are safe, that my staff is safe that are going to be here, and that the people who want to have their voices heard, that they're safe as well. And so when we start to look at that call to arms and that call to disruption for a board meeting, a governing board meeting, that's when we had the conversation, and I presented that information to Dr. Menzel so that he can make an informed decision on which course to take moving forward.
This is for whoever wants to take it. These outside groups, are we talking extremists, QAnon, conspiracy? Can you give us any more information on that?
Yeah, so let me kind of speak to that. The groups that you mentioned tend to be a little bit more of the extremist side of it. And it doesn't always have to be that. It can be small groups of people, individuals who aren't as extreme, who still call for disruption. And so that's really what we're looking at. And if you look at what's been going on around the state and around the country, and we had this on Tuesday night, there are groups and individuals who are now going around from school board meeting to school board meeting to school board meeting in the valley and in the state, with the goal of disrupting, with the goal of, as Dr. Menzel talked about, providing false information or a false narrative to whip the crowd into a frenzy. And those are the groups that we're looking at. Those are, I'll even back up, groups and individuals that have made comments of let's get to the meeting, let's get as many people as we can get there, and let's disrupt the meeting.
Last one, specifically for you, Dr. Menzel. Look, parents are always gonna, it's a tale as old as time, they're always gonna know better than school, right? Like, not the back and forth. But the things you rattled off, especially now, you called it politically charged, talking masks, vaccines, critical race theory. If you were to design a playbook for the disruption that the officer is just talking about, those would all be that. So I'm just curious to get your feeling. Have you ever seen something like this in your career when it comes to the dynamic here, and how do you feel about that?
Not as elevated as this. So I've seen a number of controversial issues. This is my 19th year as a superintendent, most of which, of course, was in Michigan. And so this is different, I think in large part because of the pandemic. I think people are frustrated, they're tired. There's been all sorts of information. We hear one thing in August, it's something different in October. The story keeps changing, and so people don't even know what to believe. It's also in a political environment that was highly charged around the 2020 election. You have a lot of different moving parts and pieces. As a school district, I think one of our opportunities here is to teach our students and our young people how to have civil conversation around differences of opinion and ideas. How do we separate fact from fiction? How do we vet the data that we're finding on the internet? Just a Google search by itself doesn't mean that the information is accurate. So we have an opportunity as public educators to change the narrative and to create a conversation that can help move us forward. My experience has been that when you sit down and have a discussion with parents who are concerned about any one of the topics you just mentioned, that their concerns are founded in sometimes the fears that they have. They're founded in some of the things that they might have heard that may or may not be true. And when we have an open and honest conversation where we're not shouting at each other, we can find some common ground and identify ways to move forward. That's the hope of our district. That's kind of what we're calling for. Part of the reason why we moved forward with our meeting on the 18th, even though we had heard that there were going to be more people there, is I had a belief that in Scottsdale our parents would have honored the request for masks. We've done it this entire school year, and people have complied. That doesn't mean you have to like it. Personally, I don't like wearing the mask. I'm looking forward to not wearing a mask. But it's one of the things that we had to do in order to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of our students and our staff. And so that was the hope on Tuesday night. We were disappointed that's not how it ended up and that we had to recess the meeting. We're moving forward in a way that will allow us to conduct the district's business and then building out plans for the future. I think you had a question next.
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
Name and affiliate, please.
Sorry, Rocio Hernandez from KJVZ. Is this Monday meeting, is that going to be the last meeting that the governing board has, or if not, what do you think is going to be the plan for the future meetings? Are you just going to have to rely on the police department to tell you whether it's safe or not to have an in-person gathering or not?
So we have 2 more meetings scheduled in the school year, June 8th and the 22nd. The second meeting of the month is our regular meeting. That's the meeting where we have an open call to the public. We met earlier today to have a conversation about what steps we need to take in order to be able to resume our normal meeting schedule. We've been learning from other districts what they've had to do, and so we believe that we'll be able to implement some strategies to ensure that we don't have that kind of disruption, but we'll be monitoring, and the police department has been a great partner in this. What's happening, what's the chatter in social media so that we can make real-time decisions as we get closer to those meetings.
Can you elaborate on what those strategies are? Yeah.
For me, and Dr. Menzel and I had a lengthy conversation this morning, and I guess the best way to describe about in-person meetings is for those that are watching the press conference, that decision is up to you. This is really about at a board meeting, and I've been in this room at a board meeting and stood at that podium addressing the governing board about different issues related to school resource officers and law enforcement within schools. But really it comes down to the civil discourse that Dr. Menzel has been talking about. It's really about your civic duty and coming to the podium for redress of issues that you have with the school board or perceptions that you have with the school board. And I know that Dr. Menzel and SUSD and the governing board welcome that, as do I, as your police chief. I welcome that. That's the civics portion of what we all should take part in. It's when there are those people who don't want to participate in civil discourse, that aren't interested in the direction of the board, that they're interested in bludgeoning the board with the cudgel of their own opinion, as opposed to the facts and circumstances that SUSD puts out there. And so really for us, and consultation with Dr. Menzel, and that really is about looking at social media and open source, and do people want to come to the board meeting that are connected to SUSD and have conversation and bring their concerns forward in a positive way that impacts our children in a positive way. So Dr. Menzel and I and his staff and my staff are going to continue to look at that. But we both have every expectation that we'll meet in person and that there'll be productive meetings as we move forward. And so that's really, and I put that accountability piece on our citizens that come forward and want to have productive and civil conversations with the board.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of that civility and trying to keep your students an example of having positive dialogue, what has the response been to either yourself or the board since this happened, whether it's emails, things like that? I've seen some of the comments online and they're not pretty, and I assume behind the email they're coming from some things.
Well, that's an interesting question, Wayne. The emails themselves have tended more positive than negative. The social media comments, I would agree, I've seen them on both sides, and that's a little elevated. There have been some negatives, and the phone calls that have come in have sometimes been negative. And I've had, unfortunately, my assistant and our front desk receptionist, they've had to field a number of very uncivil calls from people in California, New Mexico, and in the state of Arizona, expressing their displeasure with the decisions of our board, which is unfortunate that people from other states feel like they need to weigh in, when in fact what we're trying to do is address the educational needs of our students here in Scottsdale. But in terms of email, it's probably trended 3-to-1 positive in terms of supporting the governing board for holding an expectation for mask in the building while school's in session, and then recessing the meeting so that we didn't allow that to spin out of control.
Wayne, could I add just one thing to that real quick, is that if you look at it, and Dr. Menzel, I just think really hit the nail on the head, is that we have people from outside of the valley and outside of Scottsdale who are coming in or weighing in on what's going on with the Scottsdale Unified School District and the board meetings and really taking to task the issues, but in a way that disrupts the actual families from bringing those issues forward as they disrupt a meeting or have a call to action for disruption or removal of board members. And I think that's really the story, is that our own parents who have questions and grievances that they want to address and resolve with the board are unable to do so, or were unable to do so on the 18th due to a lot of outside influence and a lot of presence from people who are not connected to the district, who then don't allow the parents to have their voice.
Yes.
Yes, so I know that we've seen.
Name and affiliate, just,
Oh, Ashley Perez with ABC 15.
thank you,
I
Ashley.
know we've seen similar disruptions. Vail Unified, also Divert had a situation as well. Are you guys looking into any connection between those groups? Because I know that they've been actively going, it seems like, from one school district to another school district. And then I have one more question after that.
The short answer is yes. We saw some of the same folks on the 18th at the Scottsdale Unified School District Board meeting that they saw in Peoria, that they saw elsewhere. Some of the same names, same people who are gathering supporters and followers to participate in those meetings that are not connected to Scottsdale. So yes, we are seeing that.
Is this also, from what we've seen, Chief, starting to become more of a community-wide problem? I'm not sure if these groups are also targeting possibly businesses or churches or anybody else that would have, a mask mandate still in place.
I think you will start to see that grow a little bit, but right now what we've seen that is, if you talk about a community spread, ironically with COVID-19, the community spread related to some of that disruption, you see, and you mentioned at multiple board meetings across the valley and the state and the country, from Utah to back east, you're seeing that quite a bit. It seems to be kind of a new goal. Let's disrupt a school board meeting. Let's push a particular question or agenda independent of the facts. And Dr. Menzel has put the facts out, yet those get misconstrued or changed so that they get a larger number of people. And so really the issue is, I think you're going to continue to see this at board meetings, and so it's incumbent upon school districts like Scottsdale Unified, and what Dr. Menzel did today is to put out that information, written information. Here's the truth. Here are the facts. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that that's going to put a stop to groups and the disruptions at school board meetings, because if we're honest with each other, there are a lot of people out there who are interested in making the latest viral video of them and their disruption at a school board meeting, at a city council meeting. And so that has seemed to really sweep our nation as the thing to do. I want to make my own YouTube video showing disruption and a lack of civil discourse. So sadly, yes, I think you're correct. I think you're going to continue to see this. I think you're going to continue to see this at board meetings. And so as a community, we're all going to have to be responsive to one another to see what can we do to resolve this issue.
Another question here, and then Wayne.
Spencer from AP Family. And this is for you, Chief. You were talking about how you had seen chatter leading up to the 18th about people saying, hey, let's do something. To clarify, have you seen chatter like that since the 18th about them saying, hey, stick around, let's make sure that we disrupt the next meeting, whatever it is?
Yes. So we've seen chatter since then. In fact, the chatter after the 18th, the intelligence that we've gathered really picked up after the 18th. Some looked at it as a victory. Hey, we shut down the board meeting, so at the next board meeting, let's get more people there. So our expectation in looking at some of the chatter on there, the early chatter after the 18th, was really about, let's see if we can get between 300 and 1,000-ish people at the next board meeting. And so that's some of the public safety concern that I shared with Dr. Menzel.
Wayne?
Following up on that, there's a lot of focus on a lot of these are outside groups, with no connection to Scottsdale. But I've heard concerns from several parents that many of these groups were invited by Scottsdale parents, so just asked to be here to do something of that nature. Have you seen evidence of that, and how do you address that type of issue where they're not just showing up on their own, they are doing something?
I have not seen that. I was sifting through some of the intelligence data. I haven't heard yet. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I haven't heard yet that these outside groups were invited by local parents.
Did you have a question back here?
Yeah, 12 views. Question real quick.
Well, we hope it doesn't come to that. That's really the reason for today, is to put out the right information, to have conversation, to get good questions from the press corps, and just to really have that conversation. But yes, if we move forward with in-person meetings again, which I'm sure Dr. Menzel will, and there's disruptions to the point where the meeting has to be canceled, or there are people who are so out of control that they really commit the crime of disorderly conduct, then those are the things that we'll address at that time.
Yes, sir.
Fox 10 News. You mentioned the word chatter. You mentioned you've gotten not such, your emails haven't been that nice. Have there been any direct threats in your investigation as far as searching the social media? Have there been any certain threats?
No, the postings really are about, let's get as many people there as we can, and let's disrupt the meetings. I think everybody has gotten smart enough now that they're not going to throw out a direct threat of let's do this or let's do that. It's really, let's just be disruptive. Let's end any conversation on civil discourse. Let's get rid of masks. Let's do this, that, and the other. And so I think they're savvy enough to not run afoul of that.
And we're not seeing direct threats either, but we have received some pretty nasty emails, people wishing AIDS on our board members and their families, and wishing ill will in some ways that are pretty disgusting. And so that's hard. My governing board volunteers to do this work because they care about the students of Scottsdale Unified School District. And yet they are subject to this kind of language and response that goes beyond the pale in some respects in terms of civil discourse about differences of opinion. Yes, sir.
Last question for me. Is there any way of knowing if any of those threats came from actual parents of students in Scottsdale?
We do many times. We can check to see if they're in our system. So we can tell some cases they're from our school system. In some, they've actually identified, I live in the great state of Tennessee where we know how to do this better. And then there are some that we're not quite certain. We don't see them in our system, so we don't know where they're coming from.
So would you say, probably a hypothetical, but do you think a majority of parents, by any stretch, agree with what happened the other day?
From what I'm hearing from our parents, I don't think that's a majority. I think there are parents that have concerns about any number of things, but most of our parents in Scottsdale, while they feel strongly about whatever the issue might be, they also believe in having respectful dialogue about those issues. What I heard was a lot of people who were embarrassed and said, this does not respect the Scottsdale that I live in and love. So that's my sense, is that did not reflect something that most parents felt was a positive reflection on our community. Yes, Ashley.
Yeah, just wondering if you're working with other school districts in regards to, looking into these types of situations, or Chief, you're working with other police departments because you've seen it, become a wider thing where this is happening at a couple different areas.
So we work very collaboratively with other agencies in the Valley. I think the issue, though, right now is that this really started to just take off with the issues in Vail and other cities. Where now it's just really started to build, and I think we happen to be kind of on the front end of this, and so we haven't had to reach out to any of our partner agencies yet to really work on the problem. We wanted to address it immediately, as quickly as possible, and then address it with you first.
And we do talk with other school districts as well to find out what they did after the disruption, to find out what strategies we can put in place to ensure that we can proceed with the business of the school district while still engaging our public in meaningful dialogue. Yes, sir.
ABC routine, is there any way to discourage this, like legally? Obviously, you can't stop them from coming to meetings. But is there any way, maybe after the fact, whether that's, you mentioned sort of conduct or the trespass, to just stop this type of behavior, at least discourage?
Isn't that like the $20,000 question? Is there a way to discourage that lack of civil discourse? And I think that's a fabulous question, but it's a much broader issue. We used to be able to disagree. We used to be able to have differing opinions, and then with the school board, I have 3 grown children that grew up in the Valley, and yeah, there were times we disagreed with the school board, and we came in and you asked a question very civilly, and you worked those things out through through discourse and dialogue, through conversation, and that seems to have changed, at least for a component, a very vocal group, very vocal minority that really wants to get in and disrupt things. And so that's a tough one. We will continue to, with the school district, put out information to dispel some of the information that gets people most upset. Dr. Menzel talked about it already, that people got very upset because of misinformation. And we're living in the era of misinformation. And so I think probably one of the best strategies is to make sure that whatever the issue is, whatever the venue is, whatever the meeting is, that we get out the real information in advance so that people can look at it and digest it, have some questions about it, and then move forward. Because in the absence of information, it just gets made up.
Is it, I mean, no matter what information's out there, aren't they just making stuff anyway?
Often.
Honestly, you're gonna get yelled at no matter what.
Yes, for the police department, we often get yelled at for various things and misinformation. Yes.
We expect some of that, that when the chief and I talk, he underscores the right to assemble peaceably. And that's what we ask for. We don't ask people to not come and speak their truth and share what's on their minds. We just ask that people do it respectfully. And we continue to hope that people will be responsive as we move forward. We have another question over here. I saw a hand. Yes.
Hi, Lorraine with my Catholic career. Walter, jumping off this last question, you had mentioned that this has become kind of a trend across the country, kind of inciting some of these confrontations and filming that and that being kind of a trend. I know, masks have become kind of a flashpoint here for other underlying issues that some in the community have had, some concerns that they've had. I know masks in particular have been strictly enforced, I think, across the state and in Scottsdale as well, but are you concerned that this kind of tension, I know Dr. Menzel was asked a question earlier about whether we've seen this kind of tension escalate in the district before. From a public safety standpoint, have you seen, are you concerned about these types of tensions translating over to other issues that the community is concerned about, and are you concerned at the level of escalation or confrontation?
Yeah, I am, and I have been for a while. This is just the latest iteration of the stress and angst and with masks and other issues related to the school district. But we saw that earlier in the pandemic, or especially when we reached our heights back in December and January again, with restaurants and in Scottsdale we have a very large bar and entertainment district and nightclubs, and so what you see is a clash of people who were tired of the pandemic and wanted to get out of their mask and have a good time, and then a segment that said, no, you shouldn't be out of your mask, it's important you wear that. So we saw a lot of tensions flare up related to that. So there have been a lot of tensions related to mask issues over the last year or so, and they just seem to move on to and take a life of their own in a different venue each time. And be it a restaurant, be it a bar or nightclub, be it an outdoor venue, or running the green belt with people calling and saying, I saw somebody not wearing a mask. That puts your police departments in a very precarious position when you talk about mask enforcement. Now those masks, as they're starting to come off, it's the other side of the equation, which is we shouldn't be wearing masks anymore, and people are boiling over into those venues as well. And this just happens to be the latest venue. And I ask myself and my staff, what's the next venue? What's the next flashpoint for us related to masks or misinformation that we're going to wind up having to deal with? So for me, it's very important. Dr. Menzel talked about, I am very much, I love the Constitution and people's right to assemble peaceably. If you're upset, this is the pulpit to come to and say, I have issues with that. Sometimes we lose sight of that, and I understand that anger has kind of taken over and taken the day, but we still have problems to resolve. Masks are just one small portion of that, and if we can't do that with some reasonable dialogue and conversation, then that does not bode well for the next venue and the venue after that and the issue after that, because at some point we're going to have to talk to each other and resolve this in a calm, cool, and collected way. Otherwise, violence is going to take the day, and you see that across the country. And as we see even our own numbers Domestic violence for us is up. Aggravated assaults for us are up. Our Part 1, what I call our Part 1 crimes or violent crimes are up significantly. And so when you look at those things, those are all related. So at some point, we're going to have greater dialogue in this collectively to resolve some of these issues. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse for us.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, I have one more question. Dr. Munsell, in the spirit of you talking about providing this information around social critical race theory, which I think has become another contentious issue among some in the community. My last question for you, if I may give it two-parter, has to do with students. Specifically, have you been hearing from students in Scottsdale schools about talking about this controversial issue in the classroom and whether they see that as valuable and if they view this as an issue and as a concern for them? And I was hoping that you might be able to send a message to the students. I know you mentioned that we're set to be honored at the meeting earlier this week and very sorry for something to do with you. So yeah, if you could address that and maybe give a message to the students who are now going to be honored virtually, it sounds like, depending on whether it's in class.
Our students have these conversations regularly in their high schools. They could be a model for how to engage in respectful civil discussion about controversial topics. Anything can be a controversial topic, which is one of the challenges. But our students live in the real world. They are and use social media better than most adults do, and then they're on the cutting edge of what's the latest and greatest iteration. There are good things that happen with that, and there are bad things. But we have opportunities within our school system to have conversations about what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what it means. Our students, because they attend school with a diverse student population, have grown up with an understanding of people from different cultures and backgrounds and social identities that are different from their own. And they're open to learning in that environment. It creates a very rich and meaningful learning experience. So I really take my hat off to our students. They've navigated this so commendably. And they've come to school, they've worn masks, they've complied. What we saw when we reopened our doors in September and October was just phenomenal. And so when we get to the end of the school year, a year like this, that's a year like any other, we've got Presidential Scholarship Award winners, National Merit Scholarship Award winners. We have more than 100 students who have received the Biliteracy Seal on their diploma. We've got a number of others that have the Arts Seal. We're so incredibly impressed and proud of the Scottsdale Unified School Districts, the graduating class of 2021, and every student and their family and our staff who have navigated this pandemic together. I don't know that there was a perfect or a right way to do things, but I'll say that as we approach the end of the school year, we've made it. We have 4 more school days, and I just want to applaud all of the people who've been a part of making this school year as successful as it has been. With that, I want to thank you again for coming, and we'll conclude the press conference.
We get yelled at too, by the way.
What's that?
We get yelled at a lot too.
I know, yeah.